Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Siamak Paulson, and this is my podcast. I'm talking to an ex-colleague, I should say, and a good friend from the other side of Australia, in Western Australia. I assume that's where you are.
Yep.
Peter Chapman. Welcome to this episode of the podcast.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good to see you. So Peter, as first question of the podcast, I normally ask about my guest's career in engineering, geotechnical engineering in particular, and maybe more focused on tailings. Where that journey started for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a story I tell a few people, but I accidentally fell into tailings, and I'm sure a few other people say the same. When I was going through university, there was no clear tailings course or anything like that. I actually studied environmental engineering through my first degree, and then applied for a job at Golder and was accepted and was told I was in the tailings group. I went, fantastic, what's tailings? And I met my mentor, David A. Williams, and spent a lot of time with him, and I learned on the job. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was really interesting, challenges all the time. That led me to meet David J. Williams at the University of Queensland, and I embarked on a master's and then a PhD in geotech with him. So I worked for a long time with David A. Williams and David J. Williams at the same time, which
Yeah.
was confusing and amusing, but really good fun. Know them both well, and they know each other really well, and yeah, I learnt so much from them over the time. And then yeah, been working for the company for over 21 years now. Always been in tailings. Golder got acquired by WSP a few years ago, and the journey continues. It's really interesting. Every site, every problem, every client is slightly different, and there's always more to learn.
Yeah, yeah. And from what I hear, you also traveling because I think your role involves not just Australia these days, or
Yeah, that's right. You stay with a company for a long time, you end up attracting quite a few roles. So I've got a hand in looking after our global strategy. So I support setting the strategy and then implementing in different regions. I've got a governance role through Asia Pacific and Middle East, and so I support a few of those as well. And then I do quite a bit of technical work. So I've got review board roles in various parts of the world. I was in Ghana last week, and yeah, it's really good. And I still hold engineer of record roles as well. So it I really like being involved in the day to day, but also like the strategy side. So those two things allow me to
Mhm.
travel, and more recently a lot of risk work,
Yeah,
quantitative risk assessments, and yeah, there's been some really nice trips to see some awesome sites over the last few years.
yeah, of course. Yeah, no,
Mm.
absolutely. Well, Peter, I think what you mentioned about the risk-informed decision making or designs and construction, that would be my first question. Getting into the details of how do you think a risk-informed design should be done, and what's the importance of that?
Yeah, absolutely. The industry is moving towards that, of course, as unfortunately there's been a lot of tragic failures and they continue to happen. Most facilities, for one reason or another, probably say they were compliant with the standards. And standards-based engineering is good. It does a lot of good, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where the gaps are or allow you to prioritize the risk. You get a factor of safety of 1.5 and everyone feels happy. But what does that mean? What's the variation in the parameters? What could go wrong? What do the upset conditions look like? And that's where I really enjoy having those conversations. So developing event trees to say, well, the simple question, what could go wrong? And if this goes wrong and this goes wrong, then that could be an unwanted event. It could be something tragic. What can we control? Well, we can't control the earthquake happening, but we can control our mitigation measures, the how the facility performs when an earthquake does happen. So yeah, I think it's really important to have those conversations because then it starts to prioritize where you spend your time. I don't necessarily want to spend time about talking about freeboard when we can hold three PMPs. I'd rather talk about how well we know the foundation or other conditions. So I find that risk-based approaches allow us to focus on what matters.
Okay. You just mentioned the priorities, or kind of, prioritizing the activities during the design work. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Peter?
Yeah, for sure. And in design, we do a lot of good work. We put design defenses in place. Sometimes I've seen through review and talking to other people that people are doing them just because they always have, and they don't necessarily link it to a credible failure mode. They put under drainage system in. Okay, great. Why is it there? Oh, we had it in the last dam. All right, but doing a risk-based approach then forces you to think through, well, why is it there? To lower the phreatic surface, or is it to stop groundwater coming up, or is it, what are you trying to achieve from that? And so having those conversations early in design makes a lot of sense. And then once you're past feasibility level design, can't really do much more. You've got what you've got once you built it. You can't go back and put an under drainage system in, or go back and change the starter embankment height. It's going to be built that way. So then knowing what your compromises are, because there's always compromises, and taking them into operations, and then you can maintain your risk profile, maintain your risk processes through operations, but knowing the design well. So we like to look at both sides.
Yeah, of course. And I think the other important item here is going to be monitoring, Peter. If you want to talk about monitoring specifically for tailings dam, maybe during construction or operation.
Yeah, for sure. This is a key part. There's a lot of technology out there, and I obviously support looking at all the different technologies in there. The human eye is still excellent. We need to go and look at stuff and have inspections at key hold points, particularly when those hold points are key to stability or defensive measures you're putting in place. But my view of monitoring is to clearly link it to the credible failure mode. Know why you're doing it. There'll always be a bunch of monitoring that needs to be done for compliance reasons under the environmental regulatory processes. That has to happen, and it's very important. But when we put piezometers in or inclinometers, we should know why and have clear triggers and understand how they link to our credible failure modes, and then also what's next. If X happens, what are we going to do? And I've seen a lot where yellow or red triggers have come up, and people have then gone, oh, okay, well, how should we respond? Well, we should have thought about that. What's our plan? You don't have to, have it fully polished and a design report on the table, but you've got to know what you may have to do. And that was one of the key tenets of the observational method that I think has been missed a bit now. It's we shouldn't be reactive. We should be monitoring and be proactive.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think before I ask about my next question, which is about closure, I was thinking about the activities that ANCOLD is doing, holding those operation forums. And I think there has been 2 or 3 of those happening in the last few years. What's your opinion, and how important is to engage with operators of the tailings dams?
Absolutely important. It's the first line of defense. They see more than we see. I'm a consultant. I get the benefit of seeing a lot of different sites, and that's awesome. But the operators are there every day, and they'll know when something doesn't look quite right. So we need to talk, and they need to know what good looks like, what bad looks like, and when to call us, and have that process in the tarps. So yeah, we spend a lot of time with the operators. There's nothing better than getting in the car, going for a drive, and talking about what happens, because they'll know way more about how the dam behaves and performs than what instruments or reports are telling us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and now about closure, Peter, I just wanted to see what you think about, coming from that risk-informed approach in the design, and also like taking that in, using it for prioritizing the activities, and then linking to the monitoring. How does that sort of then link into the closure of a tailings dam?
Yeah, that's a really interesting area at the moment. With the safe closure terminology coming in following the Global Tailings Standards release, there's been an increasing focus. Quite a large proportion of the risk assessments we've done and the sites that we look after are now inactive or closed, but not yet responsibly closed or relinquished. So within that, we're looking back through and saying, well, what is the true risk? And a lot of the data isn't there. The monitoring that was completed was for the closure outcomes, which is again important, but we didn't have a track record of what the pore pressure was doing, or we didn't have any other information about foundation movements, deformations, anything like that. So going back through a risk assessment process for an inactive or closed facility is really interesting. It's quite subjective to start with, but then you can figure out what matters. You know, we can look at the different failure modes and say we really need to focus our efforts on finding out X, Y, and then move forward. And then we can repeat the risk assessment a year or two later once we've gathered information and we've got a more confident data set. And we've done that many times. You know, a couple of years ago, we did the first round of risk assessments, and we're having a series of meetings now to look at them. And it's great because you can look at the risks and say, oh yeah, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. We're in a much better state, more confident position than we were. It's hard though, hey, because these things were closed many, many years ago and they did everything right at the time. It's just, we're in a different time now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And then you deal with tailings dams at different stages of their life. You know, sometimes you go and look at a dam, you know, because the client wants to lift the tailings dam, for example. So there's an existing one. Sometimes it's a fresh new dam, you know, starting embankment, you know. How do you think, or how do you see this risk-informed design or approach can be applied?
Yeah, that's another good question, and it links to closure as well. Is we are going to continue to change plans. That's what we all need for our transitions as we go forward. But also, clients want to continue to raise their facilities or expand their resources. So there's new risks being introduced. I was at a site recently where it was a valley fill facility, but it was about to poke over into a new valley, and they had to put a saddle down. So that just opened up a new set of consequences. So then through a risk-informed design, we were able to say, well, what would it take to make that saddle dam non-credible? Let's just eliminate any potential failure in that, which means that entire new valley doesn't get potentially impacted from a theoretical dam break. So coming through that aspect, and then the conversation turned to closure of, well, okay, we're going to double the height of the facility. What does that mean for closure? What does it mean for spillways? Where do we send the water? And they're all a linked conversation, because to get to safe closure, we have to, well, the global tailing standard wording, we have no material risk to people or the environment. We've got to be able to confidently say there's no material risks. And 1.5 may not be good enough.
Yeah, precisely. Well, I think what I wanted to also mention is about the failures. And, you know, of course, we learn from every failure, but it's like sad news after every failure. And as you know, we've been publishing tailings news, and specifically in 2025, maybe we are in the month of May at the moment, and we've published, I think, 5 or 6 failures around different parts of the world. So yeah, I think it would be good if you can also mention your opinion about, you know, how to look at it, what can be learned, and are we doing globally, are we doing better compared to, like, you know, when the global standard came out?
Yeah, they keep happening, and they are tragedies, and it is a really big challenge. Some of the recent failures appear to be from too much water on the facilities. Of course, we don't get all the information. I'm sure there's investigations occurring, but one of the key tenets, of course, is the less water on the dam. Even if it does fail, it won't fail as far, but it's less likely to fail in general. You know, we call ourselves tailings engineers, but most of the time we're worrying about where the water is. And that's what we do for a larger part of it. So the global tailing standard is given us that step up, but I'm very interested to see how industry will adopt a process where companies will adhere to the intent of the global tailing standard, maybe not necessarily signing all the way up to ICMM. And that is being talked about. A lot of our clients will say, well, we want to do the right thing, but we want to, but we don't want to sign up all the way. So having that middle ground, I think, will be a good step. But as we move forward, I'm sure investors and insurers will also be asking more questions around where the global tailing standard sits.
Yeah, exactly. And I also wanted to ask you about, generally in terms of enhancing knowledge of our engineers or tailings practitioners even. So I'm pretty sure, you also heard about, different organizations, doing various activities. How do you see that? Do you think it's happening enough? Is it efficient?
Yeah, I think it's great that there's those courses out there now, and the more the better, in my view. Most companies have their internal courses, which are excellent. They allow us to develop internally, and you can share a little bit more about what went right, what went wrong. The external courses, I'm aware there's quite a few Tailing Centre, AusIMM, which I support with David J. Williams, UWA, UBC. The more the better. We've got people who go to each of them and learn different things. They have different aspects of them. So big fan of that. The big thing for me though is more sharing in industry. At the conference last year, the Tailings and Mine Waste conference, we had a conversation around, we see when things go really bad, and we talk a little bit about hazards, but we don't necessarily talk about that middle case where something almost failed. And like a red trigger occurring, and what did we do and how did we save it? And I think that's the real true learning that we can get through. So I'm really encouraging companies to share as much as they can in that. It's challenging because there's legal aspects that need to be considered, but taking a leaf out of the health and safety books, sharing those things is where we can get really good learning, and I think that's a big key to not making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I want to go back and ask you a question about your career again, Peter. I would say amazing career, 21 years you mentioned, from when you started, and I'm sure you've seen lots of different things and experienced lots of things. So this is a question I ask every guest that I have on this podcast, about a highlight, if it's one or two. But I just want to know what that highlight is and why do you think that is a highlight for you in your career?
Absolutely. I think there's probably two that stand out for me. One of them was I had an opportunity to do some work in Kalgoorlie, and I've worked on the mine. I ended up working on the mine for about 15 years, but it was in that stage of time where static liquefaction and seismic liquefaction were very much focused on. So from 2004 to about 2018, 19, we did some amazing work, some awesome laboratory testing. We had the opportunity to go into detail, and that just set my learning up significantly. All the CPT interpretation of different inversion equations, how to get it better with laboratory testing, going to numerical modeling world, all those things. So every now and again, there's a project that just allows you to hit turbo mode and go through and learn so much. So that was a big highlight. And the second one is probably the risk work in the last few years. I've really enjoyed facilitating the workshops, having the conversation, talking about risk, and going to some nice places to see. There's a few nice sites in France. There was one in the States that were just beautiful settings. And I really enjoyed that, working closely with the client, but also with a few colleagues here. And yeah, we had fun. We enjoyed what we were doing, but I truly believe we added some value, and that's the key part.
Exactly. That's it's definitely the case. I think if anyone is lucky enough to go to and see places, as part of the job, that's a bonus. But also like being able to help and educate. And I also want you to mention the course that I think you touched on it without naming it, but the course that AusIMM has, and you have involvement in there. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. David J. Williams and I support the Tailings Management Professional Certificate through the AusIMM, and quite a few of our other staff at WSP also support that through providing various lectures. So Brad Tiver and Eduardo Safate support that as well. We also have quite a few of our people doing the marking. So for those of you who are doing the tests, we know who you are. But no, it's good fun. We feel like that course is an opportunity in a relatively short format to gain knowledge quickly, and we've got really good reach around the world. And I run into people all the time who know who I am because we've been on the course. And
That's right.
then yeah, it's a really nice icebreaker for a lot of conversations.
Yeah, of course. And I think we published some news recently in our newsletter about the Spanish version of the course.
Yes. Yes, that's been rolled out now. Hernan Cervantes is leading that with support from a few others, including Eduardo, and that's really good to see that we can get multi-language courses very consistent in their delivery, and it means that we're all learning from the same base and getting on the same page, which is nice. And
Yeah,
there'll be more to come.
yeah, for sure. And Peter, as a final question, and this is also what I ask my other guests, I want you to name as many, 2, 3 other people that you know in this field, and they haven't been on my podcast before, so they will be potential targets for me to speak
Sure.
with.
For sure, and I know you've spoken to David J. Williams, of course. The couple of people that spring to mind would be Chris Hatton, who's based in our Denver office. He's been around for a few different companies, but been a lot of different sites for a long time. Chris is very passionate about training and the interaction with the operators that we talked about earlier. So Chris and I are spending quite a lot of time together now talking about EOR development programs, education, training, anything and everything. So he would be excellent to talk to get a different perspective from North America, but also he was an operator for a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
So he can provide that. Scott Glover is one of my colleagues here in Perth. He and I do a lot of risk work. He's got a master's in reliability-based approaches, and he's doing some amazing work in terms of reliability and cost-based approaches. So he would be definitely worth having a conversation about. How confident are you in your results? How
yeah,
confident are you in your parameters? He's got some great techniques around that. And then the third person who may have been on here, you'll be able to tell me, is Dave Reed. You know, Dave and I have known each other for a long time. His knowledge of liquefaction approaches is unparalleled, and it's always an interesting conversation with Dave. You know, he's got a lot of the polls out there at the moment, the round robins, and that's just helping industry, every one of those. So I really appreciate what he does.
yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. That would be great. So, no, thanks for that, Peter. Thanks for your time, and yeah, I'm sure we'll speak very soon.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you for the
Yeah,
opportunity.
thanks, and thanks everyone for watching this episode. We'll catch up with you in the next episode. Thank you.